As Harry told me about being a Board of Overseers member, the single best thing about it is that now, after decades, I'm finally Harry's boss. And so, I just want to share a few stories about Harry, and we all have so many of them, and connect them and show the profound influence that all of them had in my life. Now they might seem random, and that's part of the joy of it. So, CS11. I was a teaching fellow for Harry in CS11, which would have been, I think, 84. It's a long time ago, and I remember something that Harry gave us the license to do way back then, which was if we received a programming assignment that had an inline constant, we were at liberty to write F at the top of it and hand it back. And I never really thought so much about that until many, many, many years later in my career. Some of you will know this story. We had some software that unfortunately put in an order to buy nearly every listed option in the US market for $1. And when we traced it all back to how that actually happened, there it was. Someone had actually typed the evil line of code, price gets 1. And that led to all of these consequences. And so it was something that seemed abstract and pedantic, and yet so important. Years later, when I came out, actually after telling my parents, for whatever reason, Harry was almost really the next person that I wanted to tell. And by then, he was on a different coast. And I remember he came out to San Francisco, and Harry, always being up for it, wanted to go to a really cool gay bar in San Francisco. And so I found one, and there were Harry and I at this bar talking, and suddenly I noticed a very odd thing. It was really one of the fastest hand gestures I've ever seen in my life. But just as we're talking, in conversation, Harry's arm flashed out. He grabbed an ashtray from this gay bar and put it in his pocket. Well, anyway, I just had to share that. So I hope you still have the stolen ashtray. He wanted to memorialize the occasion, and so one top tip from Harry on that one is never pass up an opportunity to steal a fabulous ashtray. And so then, about a year after that, Harry had revised his legendary textbook, and I remember this touched me in such a deep way. He sent me a copy, and he said that, thinking of me, he had decided to put our mutual favorite gay guy on the cover of his book, and of course that's Alan Turing. And it really was through Harry and through CS121 that I discovered this love of discrete mathematics I didn't know I even had. I always thought of myself as the ultimate applied guy. When it came time to put together my Stanford PhD committee, it was really important to me to have someone who would be tough and challenging for me, but someone whom I loved. And there was really no doubt in my mind that I wanted Harry to be on my PhD committee. An immense hassle, actually, to do this bi-coastal thing, but something for which I'm totally grateful. A couple years after that, there was an interesting email from Harry. And in this email, Harry said, "Hey, Marty, you know, it seems like there's a lot of your brothers and sisters who've come through this place. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, yeah, there has been a few. There's been 5. And one of the things, a lovely thing about Harry is that he looked after all of us, even those of us who were misled and were not actually computer science majors. And so one thing led to another, and Harry thought that this was really worth some energy. I actually hadn't thought about it much, and one thing led to another, as really only Harry can do. And the next thing I knew is I found myself on the set of the Today Show. And the Today Show being broadcast live from Adam's house on the occasion of my baby sister's graduation. And I didn't really connect all the dots, and you can only see how things lead to other things serendipitously when you look back at all of it. But that was really my first episode of media training, and that was something that served me incredibly well ever since then, because there I was on the set of the Today Show, and Harry's on the side, and I'm there with my mom and dad and all my brothers and sisters, and Matt Lauer in front of an audience of, I don't know, it turns out tens of millions of people watched that thing, had said, Marty, it sounds like your mom was kind of a monster. What was it like growing up with all of that? And this is one of those things where my first thought was, I can't believe Harry got me into this. But then my next thought was, well, there's got to be something that I can say in this moment. And that was, well, she was tough. But I realized, looking back at all of it, that no two people beyond my parents have ever done more for anybody, and it might have seemed rough, but it was all for a purpose. I remember then traveling in part with Harry through a valley of darkness that I would say that the label of that valley of darkness was Larry Summers, and that was and Harry had his version of it. I had my version of it. I think as we came out the other side, certainly in terms of the financial governance of Harvard and the endowment, the university is a better place as a result. Now, here's one thing I wanted to share with you. I think there might be some recording, so I'm going to have to be a little bit judicious on this one. But one thing that never occurred to me was that Turing decidability would become a topic that I would address in a profound way in a room full of financial market regulators in London. You wouldn't really think of these things as being connected, but in part of the post-financial crisis cleanup, there was a profound idea floating out there, particularly in the regulatory community, that wouldn't it make the system better if we would just write documents about all of our code and then have people verify that the documents were perfect, and therefore the code would be perfect and it would never have errors. And so I remember saying, well, that was a lovely idea. It turned out to be an impossible idea, and something that, in fact, one of their countrymen had demonstrated: do not attempt to decide the undecidable. And so these concepts of complexity theory and decidability, things that one would think of would be quite abstract, turn out to be so important in the real world, and one wouldn't want to take any false comfort from attempting to decide the undecidable just because it sounded intuitively like a good idea. The last moment I want to share with you is something that gets me quite emotional. Somehow Harry's always known what was going on in my mind, and there was a time, I don't know if you even remember this, Harry, 10 years ago, really apropos of nothing, I was at a pretty rough point in my career. It was not quite 10 years ago. It was 8, and it was in the time of the financial crisis. Do you remember this? And I was not a happy camper, I think would be an understatement. And for reasons I don't completely understand, you got on a train and you came to New York, and you said you had only one thing that you wanted to share with me, which was that I was standing not even near the middle, nowhere near the end, but really absolutely just at the beginning of my career. And this is at a time when I was exhausted and low and thinking that I was done and just wanted to get a little shack somewhere on a beach and stare at the ocean for 10 years. And somehow, just your saying that completely changed my perspective on life, the universe, and everything in a way that I think no one else could have done for me. And so, right after those tiger parents of mine, no one in my life has done more for me than you, and thank you from the bottom of my heart.